Peter, you'll do the honors. Cheryl, let's begin the formalities.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're recording. All right.
All right. Shall we stand? Do the pledge?
Are we live yet? Are we live? Yes. All right,
Yes.
good.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. Good evening and welcome to the to a special meeting this day of May in 2021 to spend some time reviewing in the focus session the EAF Part 2 for the application for the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival / Garrison Golf Course. Cheryl, let's do the roll call, please.
Okay, Kim Connor.
Here.
Dennis Gagnon.
here.
Peter Lewis.
Here.
Laura O'Connell.
Here.
Neil Tillman.
Here.
Heidi Wendell. Here. And Neil Zucker.
Here. All right, I think when it comes to correspondence, I want to just state very clearly, and I don't know how many members of the public we have 52 total attendees. So for those members of the public who have submitted letters related to this project, I want to assure you, I mean, I can't tell you by name, but I can assure you that this board has received a voluminous set of memos. They are all being read. They're all being considered. You are not being heard in your memos. And just want to be very clear about the correspondence. Regardless of what the correspondence says, we are reviewing it. I do also want to be clear that we are reviewing those memos for ideas. No one is taking a tally of pro and con. That is not the purpose of this board. The purpose of the board is to get insight about the project, our own. That's why we have AKRF, and we'll have them talk in a little bit when we start going through the EAF. But we are reading your memos for thoughts to help us think about the impacts of this project. And we appreciate the letters. I will finally say that we will have a public hearing when this board is done adopting its Part 2 and 3, and those are shared and the public can comment on those. That will happen at a time that you will have great awareness of when that will happen. I promise you, it will be transparent and clear when that happens. We are not at that stage yet. And in the interim, feel free to continue to write to us. We enjoy reading letters from the public. Shorter is better than longer, of course, but we certainly enjoy reading all the pros from all the places. Less blue is always also appreciated. Okay, so here's the plan for this evening. We're going to go in an order among the board through the EAF. We're going to start linearly on Part 2 with item number 1. Thank you to the applicant and your teams for resubmitting it. I'm holding up this document to the board members, and that's what we're going to use. We're going to use this document, this hymnal tonight, depending on what religion you are, but we're going to use this document to go through on Part 2, page 1 of 10, and we're going to go linearly through it. And I'm going to ask the board members in order. I will go last of the board members, then we'll ask AKRF, who are our advisors, if they want to comment at the end of each session. I'd like to have the board first talk and then the comments after. Hopefully that's clear, Chris, for you and your team. And Chris, when you first come up, I'd like you to then talk. I think I've received a number of inquiries, and I think it's a fair question for you to first describe the scope of work that AKRF is operating under. And then we can go on from there. So that's the plan for this evening. I don't know if, where is he? Mr. Hollis, if you have anything you want to say before we get started, or any of the team.
I might just take a minute, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. P. Daniel Hollis, Laidlaw, and Simon, attorneys for the project. Our entire team is here tonight, and you'll hear from each of them in due course. I don't want to take the time to introduce them all. You've met them all before. First, want to thank you for the special meeting that you've convened this evening. It's greatly appreciated. Secondly, I want to thank you for making the AKRF memo accessible to us. It was very helpful to us today to be better prepared for tonight's meeting. We are really accepting of all the comments that AKRF made with regard to Part 2, most especially because we feel we addressed the comments they made relative to changes in our Part 3 scope outline commentary. If you would like, there's a little bit different from the plan you saw a month ago, and Lainey McKinnon, our landscape architect, could share her screen if you would like that for a very brief exposition of what's different. And while she's doing that, I just want to make a very strong point in case anyone missed it. It has been publicly announced that the 74 acres previously that would have remained in the name of Mr. Davis will be acquired by Hudson Highland Land Trust. And that was announced publicly in the last day or so and reported in the local paper. So that's a very important part of our project and Mr. Davis's plan to conserve, plan, and provide for the future of this entire 200-acre parcel. So Lainey, are you able to share? And I'll turn it over to Lainey, and then I think that any questions you have, Mr. Chairman, about the EAF, if they could be directed to Jan Johannesson of Kellard Sessions, and he's the compiler of that EAF and producer of it. And if he doesn't have the complete answer, he'll refer it to another one of our teammates.
Okay, Dan, thank you so much. I'll give a quick interview. It's nice to see recap of what has changed, and it's nice to see everyone tonight. We have a new expansion of the land that's available to us that Mr. Davis is gifting to Hudson Valley Shakespeare, and this has led us to an opportunity actually to both be better stewards of the land and actually respond to some of the comments that we've discussed previously during our planning board meetings. So 2 changes, and then I will be quiet and let you have the floor back. But one revolves around the entrance at Snake Hill Road. There's been a lot of discussion about sight lines and how that works. We want to point out that we're proposing a new entrance here. If you can see my cursor, this allows for better sight lines as you approach, and the entry sequence remains very much the same, and you cross at a more protected area and you still are able to enter the site. It allows for a better flow. That's one. We can get into that more later, but that's our one major change. And then as the gift has expanded, we've looked at the artist and lodging opportunities on the campus. And if you'll remember from our previous work, a lot of the lodging was in this kind of northeast corner. And what we've done is we've considered all of your comments and we've looked at the new land. And what we're proposing are 6 small cottages on an already flattened piece of land that does not have trees around it. So we're not disturbing forest. And then we're looking at a condensed, we've condensed some of the units into one single building. And that was a concern and a comment we heard. So we've condensed them over in this area. And again, on a current golf fairway, so flat, treeless, taking advantage of that open area and situating the other units in this, what is now the first fairway. And that's all. We'll leave it at that, and we'd like to hear from you on the EAF, or if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Board members, are there any questions about the plan change? I will say I do appreciate the comparisons in the binder that was given. I think it was helpful to see the shift. I did not know until I opened it the location shift of some of the cottages, and I think that'd be a nice view for the first hole. Not a bad view there. So board member questions on the new plan. Take that as a no.
All right, I'll take that as a no too.
And I'll mute myself and answer when called upon.
Yeah, and Jan, I mean, we're going to just talk, and so whether it's directed at you or not, I'm assuming if there's something to say, go ahead and say. If not, take it as a note, and we'll move on.
We got it.
If I wasn't clear, I don't know if we're gonna. I don't expect we're gonna get through this whole part 2 tonight. That's 18. Or I'm gonna try and get us out of here by 9:30. Maybe that's aspirational. Maybe 10. After 2.5, 3 hours, we're all gonna start melting, especially my fellow board volunteers. So we're gonna be mindful of that as well. I'll ask people if they want to take a break midway through, and we'll see how people are doing around 8:30. All right, so let's maybe we'll take a 5-minute break at that point. Okay, item number 1, we'll start with impact on land, and Dennis, I'll start with you. And again, 3 questions for you, Dennis. You can take any one of the 3 or all 3, which is any questions you have about it, any data you still need to have a viewpoint or information, and or any emerging views about where these check marks should be. Is a no should be a yes should be a no, should a no or small impact be a moderate to large, or vice versa? That's what because this is our document. This is our document. Dennis, you're on mute, and then Heidi, I'm going to come to you next. So Dennis, just come off mute and go ahead. Dennis is having some technical difficulties. Maybe we'll.
Yep. More.
I think his problem is the lag.
Okay, I'm off.
We got to get some high-speed access.
Off and on.
Oh. All right, so Dennis, I'm going to try with.
I need to move. Take
Oh.
Someone else is squared away.
Yeah, Heidi, let's go to you, and then I'll come back to Dennis after, and then Kim, you'll go next. So
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can, Dennis.
I think I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me or not. It looks like it's freezing up.
Dennis, my suggestion is take off your video, stop your video, and just talk. Maybe that will help with the bandwidth issue.
Okay, how's that?
We can hear you, buddy. Go ahead.
Okay. On impact on land, I see they had made some adjustments, which is good, regarding the water depth. Originally, it was a small impact. They bring it to a moderate large, which I agree with on this particular impact on the land itself. The other items I do agree with, so that's as far as I would go with item number 1.
Thank you. All right, Heidi, to you, and Kim after. Heidi, any comments on item number 1?
Do I just should limit, I think it might make, well, I can limit myself to item number 1, but.
Yeah, we're gonna go in sequence. We're gonna go through all 18.
All right. Well, I guess I don't exactly know why anything is no or small impact, but I would just like to say, overall, I think the changes to the project are fabulous. And I think that I think that, we were really heard. And so I just want to, it seems a little maybe technical to question each of these items perhaps, but I don't know why anything's in the no or small when considering the size of the project. So, there's 3 items that are in no or small, and I suppose all of those could, might need to be explained. Other than maybe a coastal erosion. I don't know whether this meets the coast, where this lands on the coastal erosion map. It's not on the shore, so. But I don't know. My comments are really on later ones, so maybe I just skip my turn.
You've done your turn fine.
Okay.
Just to be clear, if you look at the, I'll just pull it up because I think it's valuable for people. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, whomever is the host, if that's Cheryl or Cecile, can you let me share, please, my screen? No, I'd like to share. Yeah. Oh, geez. Wow. That doesn't. Okay. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. What, Cecile? Why don't you undo whatever you just did? Oh, I got it. Fine. Thank you. Who can share? Okay, thank you. Still say I can't share. All right, we may be exceeding our technical capabilities.
Can you still hear me, Neil?
I can, Heidi.
I mean, one thing is like anytime there's any construction in this area, it causes invasive plants to come in. And so, you know, I don't think it's going to have a moderate impact. I don't think any cuts to the land are going to have a moderate impact because there's going to be the introduction of invasives no matter where you cut. And so I guess to me, that's not moderate, but I don't know how that, but I want to just, but overall I think the project is you know, just to give you a preview of my view, I think it's a great project right now. I really do. I think considering all the preservation of land that's going on and consideration of all our views, but I know it's not the right time to say that, but I just want to say, I do think that there's been great changes and getting rid of and getting rid of the pesticides and the irrigation for the golf course is great. So, you know, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on, that jumps forward many items, but that's my 2 cents.
All right, well, let's go back to an item you mentioned a moment ago. This is from the DEC's page. I highly recommend board members and members of the public and applicant, if you're interested, there's a very good document for us toggling along with the EAF. I bring up this section that I think is helpful just to that point you brought up, which is this last part, which is why are we going through this process? Because if we check moderate to large impact may occur for any of these questions, that is where there'll be additional evaluation in the part 3. That's why we're going through this in a stepwise fashion as opposed to just good or bad, which is not what we're here to do. We're here to just fulfill our obligations under secret. So I just want to share that, which is why we're doing this.
Got it.
And again, I recommend, I'm going to put this link in the chat. I don't know if the members of the public can see that, but I will just put it there anyway. Okay, so continuing on, let's go to Kim and then followed by Peter.
Okay, so so as far as changing, 1A to moderate to large impact, I don't know where the water table is here. I assume that because there's wet area and because there was, there's going to be the crossing of a stream or whatever, that those are the areas in which the depth of the water table is less than 3 feet. I would assume that when you're up on the hill, the depth of the water table is not that much. So having changed, my question here would be, having changed the relocation of the road or the work that was going to go on the road off of Snake Hill. I don't know if that's where the moderate to large was mostly going to happen, if relocating that lessens that, but maybe Jan can speak to that.
You're absolutely correct. The reason for checking the box moderate to large impact with regards to the proximity of the water table is the entry off Snake Hill Road, and also any realignment at Route 9. And if we had to, at one point in time, before we relocated the Snake Hill Road drive, there was going to be a potential for the widening of the driveway across the dam, which would have also resulted in construction where the water table is low. So that's the rationale. There's no other areas on the site that we feel that we're going to potentially impact the water table with construction. But because of the new access drive off Snake Hill, potential modifications to the dam, and any reworking of the access drive coming off Route 9, there's a little wetland there that you'll remember. That's all, the depth of water table is likely 3 feet or so. So we check the box moderate to large.
Okay.
And I'll just,
so that, sorry, don't mean to interrupt you.
I'm sorry. With regards to all the items and impact on land, even if we check them no to small impact, with the exception of 1G that talks about coastal erosion, items A through F, even though in a couple of instances we checked no or small impact may occur, we did evaluate or intend to evaluate those those impacts in the part 3, and we've included them in our outline. So
So I agree with Dennis that, I agree that the shift to moderate to large impact for 1A is appropriate. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this one.
Thank you, Kim. Let's hope they all go as smoothly. Peter, followed by Neil Toman.
Excuse. I also agree with the shift on 1, and also the shift. I have a shift on the on D with 1,000 tons of natural material being moved. That seemed like a good idea to me as well. Otherwise, I have no objection to the small impact checks, and that's where I stand.
All right, Neil Toman, followed by Laura.
Neil, I'm good on impact on land. I'm fine with all the checks. Thank you.
All right, good, thank you. Laura, followed by myself.
Just a quick comment with regard to 1C. I don't know if the new buildings for the indoor theater and all of the new construction, on how far it's going down, on whether or not they're doing crawl space or a basement level. And if so, you're going to have to excavate. And if so, then you're going to definitely go down beyond 5 feet. I don't know where our bedrock is in that area. So I wonder if it's not a small impact, but it's actually a moderate to large, depending on whatever you're going to construct. So you may want to just take that into consideration, depending on ultimately what you're going to build.
Well, Laura, again, this is our document, not theirs. So
I know,
but
we don't know what they're going to build. So, so
you need more information to be able to judge that, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So if they want a basement or if they want a crawl space, that's definitely more than 5 feet below surface area. So, we're going to definitely need to know that information before we can make that determination.
That's a really good insight. Jan, you got that one?
yes, and we absolutely intend on covering that in the part 3.
Okay, but I think what Laura's asking then is, if that's the case, then why would it not be moderate to large?
Well, I'll give you the background on why we checked it, no to small. It's just because of the soils maps that we've evaluated, and the past history of the soil testing that's been conducted on the site. We don't feel that we have an instance where we're going to hit a shallow depth of bedrock. There's certainly going to be excavations with grading, with construction of buildings, etc. But at this point in time, we don't think that we have a shallow depth of bedrock. Regardless of that fact, we're going to further evaluate that in part 3.
All right, good. I have no comments on item number 1. So, and I apologize, Ron, or if Steve, you want to make comment before AKRF, of course, feel free.
No, I have no comments on it.
No, we can move on.
All right, good. All right, so our friends from AKRF, first just introduce yourselves. Please talk about the scope of work you're working on. I will state that we have posted, thanks to our webmaster, Kim Connor and Cheryl. Well, you are our webmaster, I believe.
No, I think it's Tara. I'm just helping out.
Okay,
Tara's the webmaster.
Okay, you're the helper, web helper. Okay,
Yes.
we posted.
Yes.
Thank you. We posted to the town to our site within the planning board on the town website the AKRF memo from today. So, Chris, the floor is yours to both comment about the scope of work and then give a commentary if you have anything on item number 1.
Good evening. Hi, Chairman, members of the planning board. Chris Robbins, AKRF. Nice to see those of you who we worked with in the past. Hi, and good to meet those of you who we haven't. To Neil's request, we had, based on a request from the planning board, AKRF has been brought in to assist the planning board with their review of all of the materials that will be submitted by the applicant's team on this project. We'll review all the seeker-related materials and provide input on what's being submitted. Our review team includes not only myself and Aaron Werner, but we have a pretty deep bench of technical experts on staff from traffic and noise, air quality, and cultural and natural resources. So we'll be doing all of the review of the materials you submit. The project team submits in-house. We've got also assisting with sort of a guidance in the seeker realm. We're experts with regard to the seeker process and all the ins and outs of what needs to be done. So we'll be assisting the planning board with that, providing guidance along with Steve and Ron as we move forward. And then quickly, before we jump in further, a bit of background. AKRF has been working with Philipstown Planning Board in this capacity for almost 10 years now. We've performed reviews like this. We've assisted the planning board and the town board with materials that have been submitted on projects. We've conducted training for seeker and the like. And I did a brief stint as the Conservation Board's wetland inspector before Max came on. So we're familiar with sort of the workings of the town. And we're looking forward to, again, working with the planning board on this project. And with that, Aaron, anything to add?
No, I think you covered it great. Hi, everybody. This is Aaron Warner, AKRF. Nice to see you all, those that I have met in the past and those that are new. Yeah, I think Chris summed it up. We've got multiple folks that have looked at this EAF Part 2 and 3 scope, and will be involved in reviewing the studies that come in. Our technical experts in traffic, historic, even economics. We have some folks that can look at that. So it'll be covered pretty thoroughly. Yeah, did you want us to weigh in on question 1 at this point?
Yeah, before you do that, are there any specific analytics or work processes you're going to engage in that you can explain to the board and the public who are listening about where you're going to work? And I realize you're going to be advising us, but you can you go like one step down, one click down in terms of what work you're going to be doing, just so the public understands a bit about what you actually are doing?
Sure. So as the studies come in, we're going to have to take a look at all of them, and we'll be similar to what we did for this meeting. We'll have comment memos in writing that'll be shared with the board. They can be placed on the website, shared with the applicant. Pretty transparent. We're not going to come to a meeting unprepared without something in writing.
And quickly, just to sort of as an example here, in our sort of kickoff of our work, we had a very good informative meeting with the project team. And on that call, we had our traffic expert for the area, Anthony Russo, and he and John Canning discussed all of the details of what would be going into the analysis of traffic, the roadway network, trip generation, and all of that. So for each one of the topics that are being captured in this environmental review, we have experts that will take the information that comes in, take the reports that come in, review them. Where necessary, we may reach out to the applicant to talk a little bit about sort of their approach and what it is that they're thinking about doing, and then what it is that they did as we move through, so that there'll be this ongoing dialogue. But it will be, a very detailed analysis of all of the materials that come into the planning board for this project. And Neil, does that cover it?
That's sufficient. Thank you very much. So I know your memo says you have no comments on 1, so I'm taking you have no comments on 1.
Correct.
The only thing I would add is, with regard to the bedrock or 5-foot question for C, is usually when you're building something, there's going to be a geotech report. I don't know if that's planned by the applicant, but that's another way that they'll be able to answer that question too, as part of construction.
Okay, great. thank you. All right, so I tend to try to learn my lessons. So with question number 2, item 2 on page 2, I'm going to ask any board member who has any comments to raise their hand, so I don't force everyone to talk if they don't have anything to say. So anyone have any comments on item number 2? Any board member, raise your hand, please. Going once. Going twice. As Nick Lowry would do at the Garrison Arts Center during the auction, sold. Okay, so we have nothing on number 2. All right, item number 3. I'm gonna guess there's some comments. Anyone have any comments? Dennis, you get the first right. Dennis, anything? I don't know. Oh, Dennis is only audio only. Okay. Anything, Dennis? Impacts on surface water. No, I'm gonna guess Dennis is a no. Anyone have comments on item number 3? Impacts and, yeah, Heidi, go ahead, please.
Well, I just want to say, I think it, based on on our walk through the site, it would be great if the winter bodies on the site could be restored a little bit to their more natural state, because I'm guessing that they're kind of currently in the state of almost like pools. And I don't know how much amphibious life there is living there, or what I assume that's going to be covered in the natural resources survey. But it seems to me that they're not in a very good state currently. And perhaps that's part of the plan to restore them a bit. But anyway, I guess that's my only comment on that, on the surface winter bodies.
Other comments on item, thank you, Heidi. Any comments on item number 3? Impact on surface water. Peter, go ahead.
I just wanted to just bring, to get a little better sense, this is a question that I'd like to have taken up in part 3, but pesticides and herbicides are being mentioned more and more. They're in part 1F, part 3J, part 7I. If there could be a little bit more of a sense of what type of pesticides, what type of herbicides. It's great that we're getting away from a golf course, which it has to use a great deal of this to maintain an actual golf course. But what's thought about, what's being applied, I forget the name, glycophates or something like that. It'd be nice to stay away from. I'd just like to have a little sense of how much pesticide, how much herbicide is being thought of being used. That's all.
Good question. Thank you, Peter. Any other comments on item number 3?
I'll have one question. Okay, which is 3F. The proposed action may include construction of one or more intakes for withdrawal of water from surface water. I'm wondering if that still is going to, I assume that might have been for watering the golf course in the past. So I'm wondering if that's going to continue without the golf course being there, if that's the right answer.
I'm happy to answer if you'd like to go, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
We answered that question, moderate to large impact, for 2 reasons. One, at the request of the fire department, we're going to have dry hydrants in the ponds, so there could be some withdrawal of water for firefighting purposes. And number 2, we believe that there is going to be a continued need for irrigation on site for the planting plan that we're going to propose. And we'd like to take use of the ponds as they currently are being used for irrigation. We'd like to continue that practice to some extent. The exact volume of that will be analyzed in the part 3, but we do expect some withdrawal of water to continue to happen for irrigation of the plant material that we're proposing to install.
Can I ask another question related to that? Do you happen, Heidi was talking about the ponds, do you happen to know if those are man-made ponds or if they were naturally occurring in the first place?
We have some historical aerial photos. Certainly there was a pond there for hundreds of years, but it has been expanded from what it originally was towards the dam. So we plan on sharing that with you. But to answer your question, there was always a pond there, but it wasn't as large as you see it today.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's it for me.
Do we have anything from Neil Toman or Laura? No. And Dennis, you have anything?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good. All right, so I have a couple on this one. Item letter E, 3E is an echo. Turbidity in a water body, either from upland erosion, runoff, disturbing bottom sediments. I guess for me, the water feature, which is, I shouldn't use a golf term, but the pond, which is a decent size, not massive, but a decent size, will have above it now basically a parking lot, and a relatively large one at that. And I'm just wondering about the impact of having a parking lot there, knowing it's a golf area now as opposed to some natural land. But I'm trying to understand what will happen into the pond, given what I would imagine would be some runoff that comes down from the parking lot. So can we talk about that? Because that would strike me as being potentially under the categorization of the DEC, more of a moderate impact than it would be a small one.
Would you like me to respond?
Well, if you have something to say, feel free.
No, absolutely. Erosion, stormwater management is absolutely going to be evaluated. It has to be. There is going to be a stormwater pollution prevention plan that will need to be implemented for this project. It's absolutely going to be a major component of the EAF. We checked this notice small because we feel that while there's a potential for erosion, of course, because of the amount of land disturbance, the erosion sediment control plan that will be implemented would mitigate that concern. So that's why I always check notice small, but without a doubt, and you'll see it when you get into the outline for the part 3, erosion sediment control impact on downstream water courses and ponds is a number one, and we're going to hit it hard.
Yeah, and this is a good example of where again, you as a group of professionals have much more experience than each of us as volunteers. But having had a recent experience with this a couple of years ago with Hudson Highlands Reserve, I think there's a debate about, do we include the assumption of all the mitigations work perfectly? And in that case, there'd be no impact for anything, because every plan, of course, assumes all mitigations will perfectly mitigate things. Mm-hmm. That's typically what is said, versus what do we think could happen. So this is one example where I feel there's a little bit of I have a stronger view about E personally. And I'd say I have a similar viewpoint on H. E and H to me feel like there is a moderate impact. I wouldn't call it large, but it feels, at least according to the categorization, moderate in this one board member's opinion.
Sure.
AKRF, I know you don't have any comments on this from your memo, but if you would like to comment, feel free.
Yeah, so I think, like Jan said, it's the reason for no, we understand that. If you took a look at this and there wasn't a secret process involved at all, the town's erosion sediment control and SWIP requirements and Ron's review and the inspections that are required for that, that's happening regardless. So, and like they said, they're going to be looking at it in detail in part 3 anyway. So we don't have any objection to how they answer that.
All right, great. All right, item number 4, then let's move to on page 3. Item number 4, impact on groundwater. What's Dennis? You have the pole position if you'd like to comment. Otherwise, I'll just take hands.
Yeah, I went out with the on A. I should get to the proposed action may require new water supply. And they're saying moderate to large. And I was wondering, is that taken into consideration with the golf portion of this being taken out of the picture?
It does, but regardless of
I don't know who could answer that, but
yeah, regardless of the golf coming out, we do need to install new wells. So because we have to install the well, we felt
Okay.
that we had to check it moderate to large. You know, with
Okay,
for example,
on F. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dennis. On F.
On F, you had, it was originally no impact, no or small impact. And this is regarding bulk storage. I'm just wondering how that got switched over to a major or moderate to large. What transpired to make that change?
well, nothing has changed in the plans. It was just taking a harder look at it and being conservative. There, you know, all of the buildings right now are being
Good.
heated by fuel, by oil, and there is bulk storage occurring over an aquifer. So, no, we tried to be conservative,
Okay.
put ourselves in your shoes, and check the box as something we'd have to evaluate.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Other board members with questions on comments, or additional data they'd like on impact on groundwater? Heidi, please.
So I was just wondering if, with respect to the same item that Dennis just discussed, the discharge of wastewater to the groundwater, if you've considered the possibility of using composting toilets for the site, like they have at the foundry, that would reduce the discharge to groundwater. I don't know if that's possible on a with a use this large, but maybe a portion of the site at least. That would kind of, I know you're reducing some of the impacts on groundwater through like reducing pesticides and herbicides, but it'd be great if there wasn't septic going into the groundwater there too, considering it's on top of the aquifer. That's my thought about that.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Kim, comments?
Nope.
All right, Peter, followed by Neil.
No, I'm good with these.
Neil Tillman, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. I'm going to refer to 4B, water supply demand for the proposed action may exceed safe and sustainable withdrawal capacity rate of the local supply of aquifer. I'm hoping, Jan, that we're going to see some numbers on this. It just, given the nature of the question and looking at all the additional buildings and everything, I think I look at that and I'm like, well, I don't know. Sounds like kind of a stretch to say that you're going to add all that and then say that no or small impact. So I'm assuming we're going to get some numbers to prove that out.
Yeah, we'll have a complete water budget analysis that's included in the part 3. And based on the comments we received from AKRF, I think this might be an area that's going to get bolstered a bit from what we had initially proposed. So we'd likely be bringing in a hydrogeologist to look at that even further than we initially anticipated. But absolutely, we know that's a big issue, and we'll be there.
So sometimes you wish there was a third box saying to be determined, or we don't know yet, or something like that. Yeah.
Well, Neil, that's the question I want to pose to Steve, because as I understand the sequencing, if we adopt the part 2, and let's just say for hypothetically, we keep this at no or small, and then we get into the part 3 and the board feels, that feels more like a moderate impact. Do we then go back and adjust our check marks on the part 2? Over to you, Mr. Gaba, for an opinion.
Well, you know, look, you can always amend your secret documents as far as that goes. Heck, even after you've adopted a neg deck or a pos deck, you can revoke it. So look, where you're heading here at the end of the day is when you're done with the part 3, either adopting a neg deck or a pos deck. If you want to dot your I's and cross your T's, you can go back and amend to, you know, from no to small up to moderate or large. But if you make a determination that you're going to issue neg deck or pos deck, you're going to have to provide your basis for it. And if you don't go back and check a box, but you still have a rational basis for your determination, whatever your determination is going to be upheld. So I guess the answer is a matter of housekeeping. Yeah, you can go back and do it, and it's probably appropriate to do so, but I wouldn't get too hung up on it.
Okay. All right, Laura, do you have
Can I
any
ask-
comments? Oh, Kim, go back.
No,
Kim,
no, go to Laura.
Laura, do you have any comments? No. All right, Kim, you can have the floor again.
So I'm just wondering what the threshold is for may exceed safe and sustainable withdrawal capacity.
I'm not sure I can answer that accurately tonight to know if that's a defined term by the DEC.
Okay.
I don't want to give you any misinformation, but what I could say is that we absolutely plan on evaluating that to the full extent, the withdrawal of water from the aquifer and what the proposed use means on availability of groundwater.
And, just for clarity here for the public, as I understand it, the entire town is over the aquifer.
Yeah.
So any, just as some, it's not as if there's some particular aquifer underneath the Garrison Golf Club that,
Correct.
we're talking about what's under the whole town.
Yeah. If you
I
have a
just
well,
wanna-
you're connected to the aquifer.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Kim. I'll then go. So I have the same view as my fellow epimoniously named Neil. I have the same issue on B. I don't know what the standard is for that, but given the number of buildings that we're talking about and the number of humans that will be on this property drawing water to include on top of the existing uses, I would have thought that would have been moderate. And given that when you look at the definition of each of the 4 impacts, no, small, moderate, and large, moderate doesn't mean permanent. In fact, it states that the duration may be weeks to months. I tend to feel like that one would be checked off. The second item is letter C. I'm not entirely sure why it says no or small. Letter C says the proposed action may allow or result in residential uses in areas without water or sewer services. There is no part of Garrison, with the exception maybe of Garrison Landing, that has any water or sewer services. So definitionally, that is moderate in my opinion. We don't have sewer in this unincorporated hamlet. So that one is a surprising answer to me, and I believe it should be actually moderate to large, given that we've got 21 new buildings plus lots of people at night going to the bathroom using non-sewer sewer. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Different boards answer this differently. Some think of, we do have a public water supply. It's coming out of the ground. It's a well. We do have sewage services. It's in the form of a septic system. So I think that, and I could be wrong, but I think that this question is, are you proposing a residential use that doesn't have any water sewer services whatsoever? Not municipal, but any.
Well, I don't know. That would make no sense. I can't imagine in New York State you can put a house somewhere and not put a septic and not have sewer. What would you be doing? Peeing in the backyard? I don't think I can't imagine that's legal.
We are covering this in the part 3. If there's any hesitation, I would not argue one bit with you checking the other box. It was just.
Well, again, given that it's our document, I wanted to focus, acknowledge, and again, you're still going to be filling out the paperwork anyway, not paperwork, but the knowledge. So that to me is a different check. And that's number 4 for me. AKRF, I see you don't have any comments in your memo. Do you want to say anything?
I'll just add that, like Jan did say, in response to the comments, they're going to take a deeper dive on water supply. If you go down to the part 3 comment section, number 13 through 16, those were actually, I should also make it clear that this memo was written by both AKRF and Ron Gaynor. So the utilities comments were mostly Ron's. So he's asking for all this, which we agree with.
Ron, do you want to say anything then on that topic while we're there?
Again, we look at these part 2 responses question by question, but we're also doing that in concert with reviewing the part 3 outline. And in various areas, he's clearly identified further studies will be done in part 3. The whole goal of part 2 is to identify areas that may potentially have impacts and so warrant more detailed evaluation in part 3. So we recognize that they've already committed to doing those additional studies. For the most part, as I said, where we say we have no comments, we've recognized in part 3 that they're responding to the areas that we thought were significant.
Good. Understood. What I don't want to do is what Steve was sort of alluding to, which is we come back to the part 2 to have to change it later on. I'd like to get the part 2 aligned with what this board thinks at this point based on its responsibilities. So thank you for that, Ron. Okay, item number 5, impact on flooding. Board members with comments? Heidi, please.
Well, I think with respect to item 4, given how many parking lots there are, it seems to me that there will be an effect on drainage unless the idea is to have the parking lots, be sort of partially permeable or something else. Like we did a site visit at Magazino, and they have parking lots that seemed to be partially permeable. I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but that may not be the technical term, but they were not fully paved. And I don't see how there could not be an effect on drainage just as a matter of common sense, because the water will have to flow off those parking lots in a different way than it can if it's dirt, especially the dirt around here, which is fairly well drained, not really that clay. So that's my thought on that.
Sorry, Heidi, just to be clear, is that attached to a specific line item of the part 2 you're highlighting?
Well, it's the impact on flooding, part 5, impact on flooding. It says like nothing's checked. It's checked no. And then I guess probably the answers make sense as to the floodplain. But then item 4, which says there's going to be, there's not an effect on existing drainage patterns. That's the one I find confusing, because with so much paved area, assuming it's going to be asphalt, I don't see how it couldn't impact drainage, especially because, well, I guess that's the question. I don't know if the parking lots are going to be entirely asphalt, or whether they're going to be a kind of more of a kind of what seems like possibly maybe an advancement on asphalt parking lots like they have at Magazino, for example. If that is, it looks like it is to a lay person such as myself. It looks like it has more drainage.
Let me jump in here. That's a really great point. So let me just back up on the flooding. So you've checked no, but there's two things I just want to highlight, because I'm not sure why. If you go to 5B, and I'll come back to Heidi's point in a second. 5B asks is it's within a 100-year floodplain. And of course, the benefit of part 2 is it tells you what part of part 1 to go to. So if you look, it says go to E2J as in Juliet. And you go to E2J as in Juliet, and it says, yes, it's in the 100-year floodplain. Now, I know it says floodplain associated with Phillips Brook Road, but it says yes. So that would mean it should have a check mark, I would imagine, in B, whether it's no, small, or moderate to large. And I use the same logic on 5F. If there is a dam, is the dam in need of repair? You go to E1E, which it tells us to do on page 10 of 13 in part 1, and it in fact absolutely says it has a dam, which we know of, and we've already discussed that the dam has got some challenges with it. So I'm just surprised that we have no, given the letter, the answers to B in F, which in my opinion would be different. And if that is in fact the case, I think there you got a yes in this one, and then Heidi's question around D becomes relevant to identify. Let me pause there.
Can you mind if I respond? Just for, okay. It's interesting, the question in part 1 and the question in part 2 regarding flooding are different. In part 1, it's asking, is the property located in any floodplain areas? So does any portion of your property contain a floodplain? In a very, very small section, but it does. It's resulting from Phillips Brook. There is, however, no development occurring within that floodplain. When you get to part 2, it says is there any development within the floodplain? And the answer to that is no. And I absolutely agree with the comment about changing in drainage patterns. I wish that was located somewhere else in the part two, but when you're going through these, you have to answer the threshold question first. Number 5 says the proposed action may result in the development on land subject to flooding. We're not in a floodplain. The property doesn't typically flood. So we answered that no, and then you're not supposed to answer any of the sub questions. So the relevant questions that we thought still applied, like the change in drainage patterns, we covered in the part 3 EAF, and is covered elsewhere under surface water. And we absolutely know that, you know, stormwater runoff, big concern to everybody, and is going to be covered heavy in the part 3. So that was our rationale on that. You know, any of these concerns under A through F, we're happy to evaluate. We didn't think we had to check the box yes, because the property isn't subject to flooding.
So let me come back to Steve. Let me just short circuit this, because, so Steve, if you, AKRF is saying, in fact, yes, letter F, 5F should be moderate to large, but to Jan's point, if you'd never check yes in the first place, the top of the box on number 5, you don't bother to fill out any of the lettered items. So which takes precedent, the answer to 5 or the sub questions that may actually have impacts, even if the high level order 5 is not answered? Hopefully that's not confusing everyone, what I just said.
The subsections do. I understand why they didn't fill out the subsections and why they checked it no. But if you want to be complete on your response to part 2, the subsections should be checked and they should govern.
Yeah, just you literally can't check the sub questions until you check the box yes. It does, the form doesn't allow.
I understand the form doesn't work that way, but to fill it out properly, you got to check it yes and then go do the subsections.
If I can also speak to that, we took the same view, recognizing that the existing dam on the pond is going to be under review by a structural engineer. We thought the question itself should be marked as yes. And for that reason, the potential for flooding, should that dam have structural concerns that need addressed, we thought that lower area should be checked moderate to large impact. Again, it's a matter that will be studied in the part 3 because they've committed to doing that structural evaluation. But in the interest of being conservative, we thought that question 5 should be marked at yes, and recognize the structural study in that bottom subcategory.
And again, to Ron's point there, this is something they're going to look at in the part 3. And it's something the board's going to have information on and be able to make an informed decision on, because there's going to be that structural study in regard to the dam and any other, I suppose, potentials for flooding. I can't believe there are too terribly many here. So whether you check the box yes or no, whether you fill out the section or not, look, it's good housekeeping to fill it out and have it, you know, checked in part 2. But if in that part 3, you have the study anyway, that allows you to make a decision as to whether you're going to issue a pos deck or a neg deck in regard to the issue of impacts on flooding, you're going to be covered here. So, I mean, look, I think it should be checked yes. I think they should look at, but if they didn't, it's not something I'd get hung up on. As long as it's in the part 3.
Steve, you want to go on mute?
Yeah.
It is the board's document, so I want to check with the board. So Jan may not want it checked, and that's fine, but it is our document for us to decide whether to check or not, to be very precise. So let me open up to any other board members with comments on item number 5. Going once, twice. Okay, well, Chris or Aaron, anything you want to add?
I think Ron hit our point. It is an example of the form can kind of drive you crazy sometimes with the wording. But you know, you can also interpret the threshold question on 5, development on land subject to flooding. It could also be interpreted as the entire parcel, right, which is hundreds of acres. The lands in that case are the whole parcel, even though the floodplain is in a small part of it and you're not building in it. The land itself that you're proposing on subject to flooding. It's not a big deal either way, but we feel checking yes, and definitely the dam issue for F is important. I tend to agree with Jan that the drainage, existing drainage patterns, I've always thought that should be under the surface waters section of the form, but you can't change that.
Well, Governor Cuomo is a little busy right now, so I don't think we can bother him with making a form change at this point. But
No problem. Just as a firm that prepares these two, just something that we share.
Okay. Ron, anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
There was a great MASH episode where they said, I'd like to add that I have nothing to add. It was like that line. Okay, item number 6, Dennis, we'll start with you. Impacts on air. Nothing. Any board members, any comments on impacts on air?
So I guess my question is, what's the threshold? Is there a threshold? I mean, that makes, what's what is it that makes us choose that answer?
There is a great and long description on the DEC permit page around this topic on question 6. If you go to that link I sent you, you want to click on it. On the far left-hand side, there is each question has a sub-page or a page that walks through all the great detail, more than I think any of us has time to read, how to think it through. That one I did not read myself, but maybe a quick perusal, and maybe in the interim, someone can comment, maybe Steve, about
Well,
that.
I imagine our consultants might know the answer to that, so that's why I'm asking.
Well, I don't want to step on anybody else's line. If Ron and AKRF feel differently, I'd certainly be interested to hear. But my understanding is what you do is you go through all the subparts, and if you check yes to them, if these are something that are going to be impacted, then you wind up with a yes check on the top. And if none of the ones beneath apply, and there's nothing else, they even have other impacts, a blank space for that. There's nothing else outside of the form that jumps out at you, then you can check no. And that's basically how you decide whether to check yes or no on the box on the top as far as the impact goes. It isn't that you check yes or no and then you go down and kind of parse it into the subsections. The subsections inform you as to whether or not there's going to be an impact.
Okay.
Now, the subsections do help you develop as to whether that impact is going to be small or moderate or large, but I think that's where you start with in terms of, do I check yes or no? And again, if Ron or AKRF feel differently, I'd like to know.
I could take it a little. This is really has to do with stationary source emissions, right, for the use in play here. It's not typically the case for a venue like this to have a state regulated emission for toxics. It's not that kind of facility. This is more for industrial manufacturing type projects. So our focus on air was on mobile source. So, and we indicate that in our response to this. We asked that they take a look at that as part of traffic with the increase in vehicles and air emissions from that, mobile source emissions. But yeah, we agree with no for this, just based on the quantities here. This is not that kind of generator.
Any board member have any other board members' comments on impacts on air? Heidi, go ahead, please.
Well, I just, it does seem to make more sense that we would consider the increased car traffic and bus traffic as an impact on air, but I guess if it's not customary to do so, it doesn't say it has to be a stationary source. I mean, I'd be more comfortable if it's our document acknowledging that there will be significant impacts on air pollution. I mean, you know, and there's going to be a lot of cars, and that's just, it's a lot more than there are now. It just seems to me more sensible to acknowledge that that's going to create air pollution.
So Jan, a great question Heidi's raising. Given that A through E are very quantitative and very specific, it doesn't say yet, you know, does it do something to the air or not? It's very specific about number of tons, etc. Has anyone in your team cranked the numbers to actually assess the impact?
Not to my knowledge. I tend to think that you have to,
Go ahead, Jan,
Okay,
please
sure.
continue.
I don't want to, I hate to disagree with Steve, but I think that you're supposed to answer the threshold question first and then go to the sub questions. Just reading through the instructions on the part 2 EAF, that seems to be the case. So we didn't get to crunching the numbers because we don't have a state regulated air emission. So, I mean, if that's something you want us to evaluate, specifically relating to car traffic, we could potentially do that, but we didn't get to A through F because we don't have a state regulated air emission here.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, it states very clearly, if information from the applicant or part 1 already identifies that an air emissions from the proposed project is one of that is state regulated, check yes, and then answer sub questions A through F. That's what the DEC document says, exactly as you just said, Jan. And so the question is, I don't know what a state regulated air emission is. I have no idea what that is, that categorization is. Maybe can someone give an example, maybe AKRF of what are state regulated emissions?
Sure. So typically it's anything that needs a permit through the state for a certain toxic air chemical that is being emitted. I'm not an expert in air quality. We do have folks that can circle back with them and I can get you a better answer. But the fact is the applicant doesn't believe that this is going to have any permits with the state for air emissions. For that reason, that's why they put no. But we can get you more detail in writing.
Well,
on
I think
examples and-
Heidi's question is a good one, which is, okay, what are state regulated emissions then, which is the question. And I'm certain Jan is correct because cars are, I guess cars are regulated by the state, but I don't know if that fits into the category because clearly cars are regulated because that's why there's emissions controls, et cetera. But I don't know if that meets the threshold. So maybe someone can get us some more information that feels like that is what Aaron and Chris are here to do.
Yeah, I mean, power plants,
Right.
even auto repair shops that do painting have to have permits. There's a lot of a broad set of activities that can be permitted. We can get you a snapshot of that if it helps, for sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
I think Mr. Canning might have had something he wanted to mention on this point.
Go,
Well,
John.
I was just going to point out that AKRF has asked that we do an air quality analysis under the traffic section. So I think that the analysis will be done. I think it's correct that you check the box no, because we don't have any permitted air quality or air emissions facility on the site, but we're doing the analysis that you want done relative to traffic. I presume we're going to be responsive to that. To their
Yeah, and John, I just want to keep separating two things that we keep seeming to bring together. That we're going to do an analysis in part 3 is great. What I'm trying to also make sure we do is answer these things to the board's satisfaction. And so whether we capture something that's great and awesome, and I think that's part of transparency and education, but we also want to make sure we're capturing this. So I think, look, Heidi's operating question is help educate me on what a state regulated emission source, air emission source is. I think Aaron gave some good examples. Heidi, it sounds like it would be beneficial to you to hear what other examples are.
Yeah, and then also, I just think for the final document, maybe we could just notate it. If the answer is it's only if it's like a smokestack, maybe we could just note, doesn't include, traffic emissions from cars or buses or something. So it makes more sense in a way.
Yeah, one thing, this is Chris, one thing to keep in mind on this is, Chairman, as you mentioned earlier, these are very specific pollutants with very specific quantities that the state is interested in analyzing. There's a whole series of non-attainment air quality standards that are issued, and there's significant detailed modeling and number crunching that goes into determining whether or not these a particular use exceeds any of these standards that or limits that the state sets. This, as Aaron had mentioned before, is very much about these stationary sources that are large emitters. And I can just give you one quick example. There's a rather large project up in Sullivan County, the casino project up there, and they did not have, even though they have millions of square feet of building and a water park, their on-site HVAC systems and burners don't reach any of the limits that the state has set. So you're usually talking about a pretty significant source that the state's concerned with. So for the stationary piece, usually, and we can provide you with the information that you requested, but generally speaking, something that's of this size would not generally tip the scales and require a permit.
Other board members' questions? Comments, anyone? Okay, let's move on to item number 7 then, unless there's anyone else on air. Okay, great. Item number 7, impact on plants and animals. Dennis, you have the pole position. Followed by Heidi.
No, I'm fine with the way it's written right now.
Heidi?
I think we're still awaiting a survey of whether any of the buildings will displace any animal populations, but obviously the fact that there's so much land being conserved is fabulous for plants and animals. So I can't, unless literally a building is going on top of some special plant community, it seems like the answers are good.
Okay. Kim, followed by Peter.
I agree. It looks like, in the EAF mapper, nothing really came up that was not expected. So, and it seems like the buildings are going into places where, there's grass at the moment. So,
Peter, anything to add?
Yeah, I just had one question on 7G, which talked about, interfering with habitat. And we're kind of at a crossroads right now where we're, in this particular project, we've got habitat changes going on. But at the same time, in the region around here, we've got a reintroduction of species which are unusual to to this place at this time, like bobcat, fox, fisher, martins, and so forth. I was just curious, this is just a question, not really a comment, but is a naturalist going to be brought in to kind of take a look at the land and see whether or not something is amiss in terms of habitat alteration or destruction? That's all.
Sounds like a question then for the applicant.
Do you mind if I take a answer at that or pass it that? Okay.
Lainey, go ahead.
Thank you. So during initial work, we actually had an ecologist out to site and they walked the whole property and provided the team a map of where there were invasive species, where we had low biological diversity, which is, as you might guess, on a lot of the lawns. So we do have an evaluation that lists for us areas that we might look into protecting. There are not many on the site, but they are all currently being protected. As you would imagine, they're usually in that more forested area, kind of towards the outskirts of the course right now. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, it definitely does. I'm particularly concerned about that northern chunk where Snake Hill Road meets Phillips Brook, and there's fairways and lots of forest and so forth there. But if you've brought in an ecologist and you've already surveyed the habitats, that's great. That's very good to hear. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Neil or Laura?
I'm fine, Neil. Thank you.
Laura?
Just one quick thing to jump on what Peter was talking about with regarding to G. So my question is that I do know that due to construction, there is going to be a series of vibration and impacts. And so therefore, my question is the construction schedule going to take all of those habitats regarding nesting and breeding and foraging into consideration because the construction will affect it. So, you know, I don't know how it's going to be built. And so I just, you know, I'm on the fringe on whether or not it's a low impactor or moderate to large, depending on how quickly you need to like build everything and the required needs of doing that and the impact of that.
The one thing I can mention on that is with regards to the bat and the bald eagle, which came back as species that are in proximity to the site, and the fact that we have likely DEC permits that we will need to obtain. There's going to be some restrictions on when we could do tree clearing and certain activities from the state, so that we'll have to abide by. And if we don't abide by them, then additional studies need to take place to ensure that those species are actually not on the property. So it's something that we're looking into and that we've included in the part 3. But I think that with regards to the clearing of trees and nesting habitat, that's something that's becoming regulated now by the state.
Okay. So to that point you just brought up, Jan, I feel like, and maybe I didn't read the study that you've done that Lainey mentioned. My question on each of these really is, how do we know it's small? I just heard a bald eagle mentioned. I assume that's covered under a rare, threatened, or endangered species. I'm not an expert in it, but can we just talk about what source materials we have for these being no or small? Because we do have a substantial change to the use. We're going from a half a year usage for golf to a full-time use with the theater. And so I just want to understand this a bit more, what our source material is.
You didn't miss anything. We haven't submitted that study to you that Lainey had mentioned that will be included in the part 3. So nothing that you missed there. When we got involved with the project, one of the first things we did was provided an information request to the New York State DEC Natural Heritage Program, provided them a map of the property, let them know what we were proposing to do in general terms, and then we got feedback from them as to potential species of concern. And they wrote us a letter, and they provided us with information on the potential presence of a bat and the bald eagle. Not surprising, being along the Hudson, we know that the eagles are present, but in that case, they told us it was about 4.5 to 5 miles away from us, but we needed to still abide by some tree clearing regulations, time of year when you can cut trees, or if we decided not to or could not abide by those regulations or times of year to cut trees, then we'd have to provide a site-specific study. So that will all be packaged up and given to you, but the source materials right now are coming from the DEC. I believe that AKRF wants us to also look at U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It's another resource which we're happy to do, but right now it's coming from the DEC. Someone also had mentioned their mapper, their EAF mapper, which identifies species of concern, endangered species, threatened species, critical habitat, all of that. And so far, all we've seen is the eagle and the bat.
So we obviously spend a significant amount of time on the Hudson Highlands Reserve on bats and many other fauna. And so I guess I'd ask Steve some guidance here. Feels like in this item, we don't know which ones to check for some of these areas because we don't yet have the facts about them. And there's a good example where, again, I don't want to play a chicken or egg game. There's no box, as Neil Toman said, called TBD. So how do we check this one off? Because could be small, maybe it's not, and we don't know. And if the applicant just said we don't have the data yet, or we haven't seen the report yet as a board.
I would wait until I had more information before I adopted the part 2. Doesn't have to be finalized, but you're going to need to have a little bit more than that to make an informed decision on which box to check.
Board member sentiments, everyone have the who has the similar viewpoint to Steve's? Yeah, all right. All right, well, that, just to be clear then, Laney and Jan, it's hard for us on this one to do anything yet, because again, we just need some more data. And it sounds like you wanted it as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Continuing on, sorry, board members, any more comments on fauna and flora? Okay, item number 8, agricultural resources. Anyone have any comments? None? Anything you want to say, KRF? I assume no. Oh, Kim, go ahead. You're on, your other phone's on mute.
Sorry. So is this yes, because it's adjacent to the church and to the big house across the street? Is there anything historic or archaeological on the site itself?
We actually haven't started number 9 yet. We were on.
Oh, I'm
8.
sorry, we're aesthetic resources. I
Yeah, no,
apologize.
we can start.
You can save me for the next one.
You can be the first comment on 9. That's fine. But just we're gonna move off of 8 and now start on 9 then. Okay, 8's closed. Number 9, please. Go ahead, Kim. Start again. We're still on 8. Go ahead, number 9, impact on aesthetic resources. Kim Connor.
All right, so when we've looked at this is just a question within the town. When we have looked at other sites within the town, the argument has been, I think Glenn has made the argument in the past that what's going on across the river doesn't count in terms of the scenic ridgelines for Philipstown. That it's only what you can see from within Philipstown. Is that different from what we're doing here with the EAF? Maybe Glenn could talk about that, because I'm just trying to understand.
With regards to the threshold question on number 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we just checked it, yes, because right now it's a golf course and it's going to propose to be a performing arts center with buildings of different sizes and locations, and it's different. So the land use or proposed action is different from
okay,
what's there now, and so we know that visual was a big item. So we marked it, knowing that that would have to be certainly evaluated.
okay. I'm just it's 1A that I'm just curious about, like what.
1A. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean 9A, sorry, I'm not reading very clearly. So when, in the past in Philipstown, when we've talked about other projects and gone through the AF, we've talked about the town rules on what's visible from various points, like Fort Defiance or the Appalachian Trail or things like that. And there's been an argument made in the past that, like, if you were in Putnam Valley and you were looking at something in Philipstown, that didn't count as an issue because Philipstown's rules only apply to Philipstown. And so I'm just curious, because some of the materials that you submitted came from across the river. I guess what I'm trying to understand is, like, going forward, should we always be considering, and this is why it's like a question for Steve or Ron or whoever, like, what are we obliged to consider here based on our zoning?
Kim, I got to tell you, I'm not sure what you're referring to as far as that goes. And look, maybe I'm just not remembering correctly. I don't remember Glenn ever making that argument. When it comes to SECRA, when it comes to visual impacts, the big consideration is it going to be visible from important public viewpoints? It's not necessarily, is it going to be visible from, the residential neighbor property next door? So
no, I mean within the town.
Certainly, if it was Orange County, if it was Putt Valley, if it was Fishkill, I mean, if it's visible from a designated federal, state, or local scenic or aesthetic resource, I don't care where it is in terms of municipal boundaries. It's something you take into consideration. But I mean, if somebody has different understanding in that, I'd love to.
May I chime in here since I was quoted?
Yeah, sorry.
Steve is right. The rules in Philipstown is from publicly accessible places, and that does include places out of town. we've looked at that from a number of different projects. I'm uncertainly, almost certainly have said, you know, it's 5 miles away and we're putting up a 2,000 square foot house and there's no real impact, even though there's a direct line of sight. I'm certain I've said that in cases, but we've looked at sites across the river many times and sites from Putnam Valley a few times. And we're doing that again. I think the conclusion is going to be in this particular case that even though you can clearly see Storm King Mountain, Storm King Highway, looking back at the tent, which is obviously one of the things that people are concerned about. While there's a direct line of sight, it's going to be a blip. It's not going to be something that has any significant impact. And so so that's why we're looking at it, because it is visible. The property is visible from a publicly accessible place.
We also felt that because it's in the scenic protection overlay district and you have that buffer on your local roads, and it certainly be, or all roads, I think, visible from those roads. So or some of them. So we checked that. Yes, more because of the local than the federal or the state.
Again,
So-
this is a state document. We're not filling out a local document. This is a
Right,
state.
that's why, well, that was what I
state
was asking. And also, you know, maybe we should send a memo over to the people over in Highland Falls that they should be paying attention to this part of seeker.
Well,
Since
let me
we can
pause there.
certainly see
Are you
everything
being
they do over there.
are you
I'm
being
being
serious?
facetious.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you know, we're a lot more careful on this side of the river than they are. That's it. for
Having
me.
gone to school outside or inside its gates, I can tell you absolutely we could use a few less pawn shops over on the other side of the river outside of West Point, but that's whole other story. Okay, Laura, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I did see that they included the view sheds and you're showing them from summer and winter and the foliage and the differences. And I don't know if this is going to be covered in the lighting section, but does it not make sense to also include a view shed in the evening? Because there is going to be an impact. Like, so in your view sheds, if you look at them today, there is very minimal impact just due to the location and the foliage, you know, both in winter and in summer. But, you know, during the summer when a production is happening and you have lights, even though you don't have significant lights going up into the sky, there will be an impact because it will be visible. And, you know, I'm not sure if that's something that we can request or to look at, or do we care? Just putting it out there. And I don't know if that's also going to be just covered in the other section of the report.
And Laura, are you comfortable with the way the check marks are checked at this point?
Yes, sorry. I'm fine with the way that the check marks are, but I'm wondering if there needs to be an added like drawing and or study to just be added to it just for that purpose.
Interesting idea. Other comments? Peter, please. Peter, you're on mute, my friend.
Letter E, the proposed action may cause a diminishment of public enjoyment and appreciation of designated aesthetic resource. Now, I'm not sure if this is a designated aesthetic resource or even if this is the venue to talk about this, but the letters that we've been receiving certainly point to a good percentage of people who feel that there is an aesthetic change that they're not particularly happy with. It's a scenic overlay, something that's a designated aesthetic resource, or how is this going to be addressed? How is the public input going to be addressed, or is it at all going to be addressed, or is this simply the planning board's document?
Well, this is our document. You asked a couple of questions, one of us and one of the applicants. So in your latter one, this is our document. as I stated earlier, and I've stated many times over and over again to the public, we will have a public hearing before we vote on a positive or negative declaration. So the public will have a chance to voice their opinions verbally versus in writing. So I just want to be clear about that. But this part 2 is our document. It is our planning board document. In fact, the applicant has been kind enough on the cover sheet to state exactly that, prepared by the applicant for planning board's consideration. And we all know that. This is our document. So it has Peter Lewis's blood all over it when you do your John Hancock, okay? So it's your document. But your first question is a good one. I don't know who wants to take that one about aesthetics and what is the definition of one and in whose opinion. Maybe Chris or Aaron want to take Peter's question.
Our interpretation of that question typically is if the site is a designated aesthetic resource, which it's currently not, to my knowledge. I mean, we are in the town's overlay, the scenic overlay district, which is why I thought we believed it was appropriate for this to be yes, and then all these, especially A, yes, because of, or moderate to large on A because of the local regulation of the scenic overlay. Like Steve mentioned, when you look at aesthetic resources, it's about publicly accessible vantage points. You know, it's not about somebody's front porch. You know, usually it's about the publicly accessible spaces like Route 9 or hiking trails nearby, parks nearby. That's how it's assessed. The applicant's proposing to look at it from multiple places along Route 9. They also have proposed some locations on the other side of the river, which we had comments on in the part 3 part of our memo. But also the SHPO has to weigh in about the historic resources that are near the site. I don't think they have yet. And they might have an opinion about, you know, contextual impacts between the project and a resource nearby for visual. That's not been submitted yet to know what their thinking is, but that's all part of the applicant's part 3. Does that help answer some of that?
Yes, very good, thank you.
And I'll just, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
You'll see that there's some exhibits attached to the EAF submission with regards to visual and noise and traffic, and it was intended to show, you know, the scope of work for those studies, and specifically areas where we want to get input from the board. If we're specifically for visual and noise, are we looking at the correct vantage points? And we've identified the areas that we think would be most important to evaluate, especially with visual and noise, where we want to study ambient noise and noise impacts on the, you know, along the property lines, and where we intend to take, you know, show sightline profiles and perspectives of the site from publicly accessible spots on 9 and other public roads. So when we get beyond the part 2 here at some point, and we can dive into those exhibits, you could say, hey, in addition, you know, if there's another vantage point that you think is important that we aren't identifying that we're going to study, then, you know, we'd be happy to discuss that.
Thank you. Any other board members have questions on number 9, impact on aesthetic resources? Okay, I have one. Letter B, excuse me. The proposed action may result in obstruction, elimination, or significant screening of one or more officially designated scenic views. Is Storm King an officially designated scenic view? Anyone?
I don't know.
Jim Surowiecki always talked about the wisdom of the crowd. We've got a crowd here. Does anyone know the answer? Okay, so I'd like to get an answer to that, because I would imagine it is a scenic view. It is certainly been designated unofficially. Whether that's official, I don't know who the official is, but I need an answer to that, because my view on B would depend on whether Storm King is officially designated. If it is, I would imagine it is a moderate impact. We're going to put a decent sized building, or not building, but tent that has some, even a small occupation of view of it. And that's my view. So I'd like to know if it's officially designated. Term concludes. And anyone who is maybe AKRF can take that on to research what is officially designated.
Neil, can I ask a question? What's the impact on the Storm King view, though?
Well, the impact will be that if you were right now, if you're standing, as you remember from our walk, if you're standing on that wonderfully windswept point,
Yeah.
and you're looking out, there's nothing in the way. Now we're going to put a building in there, or not a building, a tent, and it will be blocked. I'm not suggesting it's not.
Just in that one spot.
Yeah, that's one spot. It doesn't say the letter B says may result in obstruction of one or more. It doesn't say a lot of obstruction. Doesn't say from a public spot. I'm not commenting on letter A with the federally designated. I'm not commenting on letter C, publicly accessible vantage points. I'm just reading through the point. That's my interpretation.
But didn't they just say not from a private porch or that it had to be from a public spot?
Well, that's not what B does not say anything about public or private.
B is asking if, and Neil's asking if Storm King Mountain specifically is listed as a officially designated scenic view. The state usually has a list. We could dive into that a little bit and get back to you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments in this section? Okay, oh, go ahead, Neil Tillman. Go ahead.
No, I hate this question. I've had to fill out a couple of these. I hate number 9. I've always looked at that as something more pertaining to historical districts or something. If someone wants to, if they want to put up a new building in a historic district and they're trying to build something very modern in a colonial part of town, I think that's sort of what that's how I've approached this question before. That's all. I think I think that's where they're headed with this. So maybe when you get Cuomo on the phone, we'll ask him that too.
I will pass that on. All right, good. So we're halfway done with the EAF, and we're about an hour and 40 minutes in. Board members, would you like a 5-minute break? No one?
I think we're on a roll, Neil. Let's go.
All right, let's keep going. Item number 10 then. Impact on historical and archaeological resources. Anyone want to comment among the board?
Me. Okay. Me?
You or you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Great. I was just waiting to get your permission. Okay, so this is the question I have. Is the golf course a historic or archaeological resource, or are we talking in this case about Brookmead across the street and the church across the street?
We are talking about Brookmead and the Methodist Church and Parsonage.
Okay, that's my question.
I'm going back. I'm sorry. I think that the site might be in what the state identifies as an archaeological sensitive area, based on the mapping provided by SHPO. And all that means is if someone found an artifact, anywhere, and it was documented to this SHPO, they create a buffer over that artifact, and they ask you, if you end up being in that buffer, and it's about 500-foot buffer, to provide an evaluation. So I believe that, I know that the site is in the archaeological sensitive area, and that's why we had to consult with SHPO, and we're providing them additional information as to the past use of the property and the past development, and they're going to make a determination as to whether we need to do an archaeological study. But with regards to the historic aspects, there is no eligible listing on the golf course itself or on the subject property. It has to do with the church and Brookmead. We are in the archaeological sensitive area, which is requiring us to consult with SHPO to determine if further evaluation is necessary.
will we see a copy of what they send you back?
Yes, yeah, we'll include all the correspondence of what we sent them, what they sent us back. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, other comments on item number 10?
Neil,
Go ahead, Dennis, please.
Neil,
Yeah, Dennis, yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
On E3 regarding visual elements, introduction of visual elements that are out of character with the property, site or property, it's labeled or checked off as no or small impact. Just seeing some of these perspectives or elevations of the new buildings and the tent, wouldn't that fall into the moderate to large category impact?
It sounds like you think it does.
It comes to mind, we're dealing with an existing golf course, and now we're putting up this tent, which I'm not even quite sure what it's going to look like. So it's just a question if it should really be as a moderate, at least as a moderate impact.
Other thoughts on that from board members? Thank you, Dennis. Anyone? Kim, please.
So I guess the question would be, will the buildings that are going to be erected, be consonant with the Garrison existing building as it stands, or will they be quite different from that, since that's really what we have to measure it against? A tent, I don't know. I don't know how to evaluate that. But as far as I suppose that's where that would fall into that category for the buildings that are going to be constructed or added. That's my thought.
Is that not number 9? We're back on 9. Just trying to get my space in the back in the part 2 here. Is that 9?
No,
Jan,
it's 10. It's
Jan,
10.
he's
It's
talking about 10 Roman numeral letter 10 letter
E.
E Roman numeral 3, the last item in 10.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Kim. Other board members' comments on either your own or what Dennis is raising? Okay, Dennis, I think there's merit in what you're saying. I would support that. Not because it's bad. It's not meant to be a bad piece that it's out of character, but it is a different character. It is, my sense is it's a different character. That's not bad. I think that the language here is charged and it sounds negative. I don't think it's a negative point necessarily, but I think that makes sense. I know AKR, if you had some items in your memo on number 10, please go ahead.
Yeah, we recommend that moderate to large be checked for all 3 of those, only because you've got SHPO consultation underway. They've already requested, from what we found in the database, they've already asked for the phase 1A, I think, for the archaeology sensitivity. And you've got 2 structures that are adjacent to the property. So because of that, it doesn't mean there will be impacts, but SHPO is going to evaluate all that and get back to the applicant in writing and to the planning board in writing to fully determine what they want to see, how they might want to look at plans against the architecture of the nearby buildings. They might want to have them do sampling in certain spots that might be sensitive for archaeology. We just don't know yet. It's a safe bet to just put moderate to large for those, given the property's location and the resources around it.
I just wanted to mention that the correspondence that we got from SHPO, and it made the letter that I got from them sounds like it differs from the database that you looked at, Aaron, indicated that they were yet to make the determination as to whether phase 1A needed to be done. They asked us to provide additional information on the past disturbances of the property and where our structures were going in relation to the past disturbance before they made that determination. And we're in the process of responding to them. So
sorry about that. Okay, fair enough. That either way, they're in it. They're looking at everything and they're asking you for stuff. So that's great.
Okay. Anything else on item number 10, board members or anyone else? Okay, let's do number 11, impact on open space and recreation. Again, starting with Dennis, anything?
Just the loss of the golf course, loss of recreational opportunities.
Yeah, that was my strict reading of it as well. Not that I think it's I hear your point. Your point is that it's a yes because it's a loss of that opportunity.
Yeah, it would be a yes, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's almost a positive thing in this case.
Yeah, when I read the details of what a recreational opportunity is, because some would say golf is a sport and many others would say it's not. The description said, quote, but not limited to hiking, biking, and it listed some other things. Golf was not listed, but it said not limited to. So I think at least the way the DEC defines it, slightly more activities than swinging a stick. But I think you bring up a good point. I think we can all debate golf's merits, and certainly Mr. Davis can tell you about the financial demerits of golf. So I'm open to making that a yes myself, but I'm not terribly enthused either way. Other board members' comments on what Dennis is raising or others on impact on open space?
I'm okay with leaving the no, so don't get me wrong.
I had the same reaction. Others?
I think it should definitely be a no, in my opinion. But based on the fact that there's going to be a lot of open space preserved and enormous recreational uses of the site, including both the theater and the more passive recreation. I don't see how you could say I mean, it's an impact, but maybe this is another one where we could just make a notation that you're just weighing one type of use against, versus another. But a use that perhaps is kind of disappearing, or based on the fact that the golf use was declining.
Loss and then a gain equals a net. Yeah.
I mean, and it's obvious that hiking is like an out of control use in this area right now, out of control. So people want to be outside in parks, that's for sure.
Other board members' questions, comments? Number 11.
I agree.
Anyone else? AKRF?
No, we agreed with the answers they provided there.
Okay. All right, good. All right, item number 12, impact on critical environmental areas. Does anyone have any comments? So it's a very short section. Going once, going twice. Gone. I don't have any comments myself. Okay. Impact on transportation. Let's start with Dennis.
No, just on 13F there, we're just waiting for the the full traffic analysis. I just had a note that it's pending.
Others? Were you saying something, Dan? Okay. Any other board members' comments on impact on transportation, please?
I agree with it.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, I have a comment on 13D. Proposed action may result in the construction of paved parking area for 500 or more vehicles. I clicked through all the items on this here sheet large concept plan. My counting of the number of spaces was 522.
Right.
So that says 500.
It says proposed action may result in the construction of paved parking area of 500 more vehicles. So while we absolutely have more than 500 spaces, we provided there's a few hundred parking spaces there already, and we're going to have a good chunk of the parking on pervious surfaces. So the project will not result in 500 new paved parking spaces.
So what is the net new number of parking spaces?
It says the construction.
I know, but you just said it will be so I asked you what's the net new then? If it's not 522, what's the net new?
Oh, okay. That is provided in the part one. We have 173. There's 522 proposed. The net's 349.
All right, thank you. I will say just at this moment on 13A, I have been really thinking about the flow of traffic at this property, and I'm cognizant that I've heard, I forget who said it recently, that, and maybe it was in one of the letters, one of the public, around the traffic at Boscobel is all through one ingress egress on Route 9D, and there's never been a complaint by a neighbor. I remember that was a particular letter someone wrote. And I must say, I think I've alluded to this before, I want to just spend a moment raising this issue because I really do want to think it through, and I want to hear the applicant. We don't have to do it tonight. It's not part of tonight's conversation, but I do want to just maybe have AKRF discuss. I want to talk about traffic flow. I have this chest pain a little bit on one of the great gorgeous nights that there's an amazing event happening and we got lots of people and we've got cars flowing, not just on Route 9, which is perfectly reasonable through the Route 9 entrance, which is exactly what happens to Route 9D at Boscobel now. But then we also have cars leaving from Snake Hill and heading over to the same intersection, whether we have a light or not. I have stress in my mind, in my chest, about the volume of cars flowing from two different directions in the same place, assuming let's just assume the traffic is, sorry, that's Metro North coming through here, the station. Wait a second. Never thought I'd be living in a train or working in a train station. So special. Sorry. So I do wonder about the flow of traffic, especially leaving, not entering as much. And I am not worried about the road traffic on 9 as much. And as for the folks like John Canning, who have had a lot of time in front of this board talking about traffic onto Route 9, I'm sure the data will show that Route 9 can handle some infinity number of cars from all our conversations, despite the letter that we sent out to other organizations about that. But I do get a little nervous about traffic flowing not only onto 9, but more importantly onto Snake Hill, which, while it's a county road, it is a small road. It's a very, very tight curve, as everyone knows, that portion between 9 and right where your entrance is, even if you widen the entrance. And so I just want to plant a seed to have a conversation about flow. I am not suggesting you can have access. It's not my place to say that. I personally have this vision that access in and out of 9, since certainly egress through 9 would be a safer alternative and probably have less impact on local traffic trying to use Snake Hill, which is generally for more local traffic. And again, it's just something that's that I've been thinking about, and I just want to have a discussion when we come to the traffic plan in more detail about that. And there's no response required. It was a rhetorical comment. I just want you to take that as a note.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your insights.
I don't know if I have any insight, but I had a feeling. That's less than an insight.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 14, impact on energy. Board members' comments. Dennis, anything?
Nothing. I'm okay with.
Any board member, any comments? AKRF, anything to say? Nope. Going once, going twice. Okay. Number 15, impact on noise, odor, and light. Dennis, you got anything for us?
No, I noticed that they changed B from a moderate to a low or no or small impact regarding blasting within 1,500 feet. And I'd just like to know why that was changed.
At the present time, we don't believe that any blasting will be required, given what I was stating earlier, that we don't feel there's shallow depth of bedrock, but we're going to look into that further. But as of now, we don't feel that blasting will be needed.
Anyone, other board members?
Okay, but
comments?
the change was, no, the change was made based on an assumption that you just wouldn't need it.
It was made based on the evaluation of the soils on the site and their depth of bedrock.
Okay. Okay.
Site work that's been conducted there.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Other board members' questions, comments? Noise, odor, and light. Heidi, please.
I just have a question. What happens if the noise is louder than is expected, or the lights are stronger and do affect the neighbors? What could that, like, what happens then? I mean, even if the best, like if the best laid plans don't work out and the light isn't as contained, or, you know, like, do the neighbors have any recourse?
Maybe Steve could take this, but I'll take a first crack. I think, you know, this is a special permit application, right? And we're going through a SECRA review. And if there's impacts that are identified in the studies that are going to be done, and mitigation is identified to through all the review and the public hearings to address those can be conditions of the special permit that they implement those measures, whether it be, you know, screening, additional plantings to address light, whatever it may be. And the enforcement is if those don't get implemented, it's violating the special permit. That's my initial take on it. I don't know, Steve, if you want to add to that.
Aaron, I think you're spot on as far as this board's responsibilities go. It doesn't really enter into the SECRA review. It will enter into the permitting process. The neighbors, of course, have their own remedies at law and for things like nuisance. So, I mean, you know, it's just not something that you should get hung up on at this stage of your SECRA review.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, please.
Quick question. So then on 15A, when it says the proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by the local regulation, what is the local regulation?
On noise ordinance.
And is that our, like, so for Philipstown?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's like 90 decibels or something like that, if I remember correctly, from when we were talking about the woodlot.
So the local code says 50 decibels dBA between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. And then at night, between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. is 40 decibels, except if the ambient is higher than these levels. If the ambient is higher, then the level is 5 decibels above ambient.
Other comments on noise, odor, and light? Okay, I have one related D and E, light shining and sky glow. So I noticed you have a memo in the back I forget where it is, but near second to last page or so, in here, that you have a acoustical survey that's noise or sound at least. How are we going to get some information? Because I don't yet know how to interpret D&E. I don't know right now at night, at least. It says existing area conditions. It's pretty black at night. Golf is done by 9 o'clock at best for those twilight players. But there will be activity. I think 11 o'clock we said. So I don't know how E is not a moderate to large impact. But I'm also open to waiting to read some data about that. But that one is. I don't know how to get an answer on that one, like an earlier conversation, without having a little more information.
Sure. We do have some verbiage in the Part 3 EAF outline where we're going to analyze light. We've already committed to dark sky compliant lighting. The applicants or the owners are going to commit to certain hours of operation for the lighting. So I can understand your hesitation, but we're going to provide additional information to hopefully get us to a point where you can be satisfied with that checkbox, but it's to be provided. It has not been provided to you yet.
Here's my question again: is if you're going from absolute blackness, from, let's call it again using those numbers, 9 to 11, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., and now you've got, even if it's dark sky compliant, you've got lights going down from a theater onto an area. How is that not going to be brighter than existing area conditions?
Well, it says sky glow.
That sounds like a term of art.
Sky glow, I think, is upward lighting, in my opinion. But I don't think. I can understand your hesitation, and maybe you don't have the information yet to make that.
I'm fine to leave this one open along with I forget the other couple we've discussed, but at least I feel like I need a little more information.
I can understand
for D&E personally. Okay, anyone else on 15?
Neil, just really quickly,
Please, Laura.
just to say, to jump on what Neil is saying, this is what I was alluding to before. I think you need to provide a view shed that shows the ambient lighting at night. I mean, you're already showing it for summer foliage and winter, which is fine, but it's all during the day. And even though you're not doing uplighting into the sky, there will be ambient light that'll be reflective under a dark sky. And I think it should just be shown, just so that we can see the impact.
Okay. Let's move on. Thank you. And Laura, by the way, you don't have to be quick. Take as long as you want on these. I know you've said that. I know you're being respectful, but we're going this in a painstaking stepwise fashion. So for transparency purposes, we're all in step together. There's no rush. Kim, go ahead.
No, I was swatting at a bug.
Oh, did you get it?
I don't think so. I have the window open because it's hot in here when you close the door, and all the no-see-ums are coming in.
God, you're struggling over
I
there.
know, life is so hard. I
Life
know,
is
and then
hard.
I had the dog in here before, and the smell was atrocious, so I had to kick him out.
Wow, that's a whole other problem. God, smelly dogs. Life is good here in the country. All right.
They're odors. That's in category, the odors and noise. Odors, noise, and light, probably.
That was the first
No
EAF part 2 joke we've had tonight. That's a good one, Heidi. It's good. It's good. All right. Well, speaking of which, the dog impact your human health. Number 16. Let's go. Oh, so, actually, Laura, did we finish your point though? I'm sorry. I was being. Yes. All right. Thank you. All right. Everyone okay off? Going to move on to 16. Okay. Now, item 16, impact on human health. Any board members, any comments?
So I thought this was really interesting, and I appreciate AKRF bringing up the point that a golf course often may have residual chemical issues. And I agree with their assessment that it would be important to find out if there is anything there. And that's pretty much it for me.
Laura, you had your hand raised too.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo what Kim just said. You know, is there any way, I mean, I don't know, like whether or not they do any sort of sampling to just get a better understanding of what that is, to understand if there is contamination. But yeah, I mean, without knowing, I don't know. I mean, I can't say whether it's small or no impact to a moderate.
Other board members?
I agree with that too. I think they should sample the soil and the witter there and see make sure it's not like a Superfund site.
We already had one of those.
Well, there was definitely no battery plant at the golf course. I think we're all pretty
Correct.
confident of that one. So I think we're clear. But other board members, I think AKRF should just give a little more explanation here than on their
Sure,
commentary.
I can take it. So we recommended just putting yes for that. Although a golf course doesn't really fit into any of the A through M questions necessarily, you know, that's fine. They could put the appropriate answer for each of those. The issue that we raised is that typically what's done with SECRA, you know, that when you're looking at hazardous materials or the potential for hazardous materials from a use is either a phase 1 environmental site assessment report is produced, which can give a history of what's there, what kind of chemicals were found in the inspection. It usually involves an inspection of structures, in this case, maintenance buildings, you know, see how things are stored, evidence of any leaks, and also interviews with the operator, right? And try to get to the bottom of what kind of chemicals were used on the lawn areas over time, but, you know, get a good understanding of what those pesticides, herbicides are. And if you have a case that, hey, there could be a potential here, it might just involve a little limited sampling in the areas that are going to be disturbed. That's pretty much what our comment lays out. It's kind of a limited phase 2, but not like a full-blown study. But we asked to look into those things, and we'll see what the applicant comes back with. But typically, when you're dealing with golf courses and shallow contamination potential, when you disturb that to build something, there's health risks, right? And there could be a plan in place to take care of it during construction, or there'd be a health and safety plan for workers that are going to be on site. That could be one solution. Again, we just want them to take a look at that, and I think it's worthwhile.
Okay. Other board member questions on this? So Kim and Laura, you're proposing a yes on it and then no or small for A through M?
I don't know about Kim, but I would say a definite yes. You know, I'm still on that. I don't know how to answer either whether it's a no or moderate,
Right.
like small or moderate, unless a sample is taken.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point with
dance.
triggering it yes would just automatically make them discuss it in part 3, which they're not now, and we're asking them to.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I agree.
How do we make the burden modest in terms of soil discovery? Like I don't want these guys doing 10,000 acres or 1,000 acres of checking for soil. How do you do this in a modest way?
Can I make a recommendation on that?
Jan, the floor is yours.
We saw the comments. We don't disagree. I would propose to bring in a consultant to evaluate this and propose a scope of work that then could be evaluated by AKRF, and they could have similar to what we've done with the traffic and the noise, provide, you know, what they feel would be appropriate, and then have AKRF weigh in and the board weigh in.
That works for us. We can have our site assessment, hydrogeologists and everybody, take a look at that scope for sure.
And I don't know what's been done to date, and I haven't, we just got the memo. I haven't talked to Chip yet. I mean, it's very possible some of this work's been done already, and I'm just not aware of it. So, but one way or the other, we'll address the
Okay. Other comments on health? Anyone? Okay. Item 17, consistency with community plans. Dennis, we kick it off. Any comments?
I was okay with the no.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else?
It seems to me that this question really is asking, whether or not there's going to be a lot of housing built that'll bring people in to stay. So it so it doesn't, and doesn't seem to me that it's an issue. I agree with Dennis.
Other board members? So I have I'll go. I have a slightly different view because, and again, it feels like there's a little bit of a, I'm not trying to create a catch-22, but when I look at C and the fact that the zoning, the usage is requiring a law change. So by definition, it's not allowed by the current zoning, which is why we have to change the law to support this. It feels like then it is not consistent with adopted land use because we've got to adopt a new land use. And so there's a little bit of a, if all this was if we didn't have to make a zoning change, it would already be consistent with the land use, but it's not. So that's why they have to make a zoning change. So it's kind of to me, it's automatically, if you have to make a zoning change, it automatically seems to trigger that it's not consistent with adopted land use. I'm open to Steve and Dan as also an attorney here to have a slightly different viewpoint, but that is my question on this one.
Steve?
Go ahead, Dan.
No, you go ahead.
All right. Clearly, the part 3 is going to have to evaluate the potential impacts of the new uses that are proposed under the zoning. So whether you check this yes because of the one box, or put it under other, or you just leave it as no, at the end of the day, the board is going to be taking a hard look at the potential environmental impacts of the proposed amendment to the zoning code. So I mean, it's like I said at the beginning, look, maybe you could be a real stickler and mark it yes and put it in under other, or check the zoning if you wanted. I don't think it's going to make a difference in the end, because like I said, I know with certainty that that's going to be looked at in detail.
I agree with Steve in that the text amendment is going to shrink the area of the PDD for openers and will change and remove certain of the uses. So all of it will have the hard look taken at it in the scope of both the secret process and the evaluation of the text amendment.
The board members feel differently, or okay. So I'm inclined to ask to make this a yes, with C being no or small, and then leave the rest blank. But if we don't have we don't have a wide support for that, I'm not going to push hard for that one. Peter, go ahead.
I agree with you. I also think that A is the proposed actions land use components may be different from ... current surrounding land use patterns. The language is very flabby, and so I think it, a yes is probably warranted here. And I mean, this is going to be the document that we're going to, the document of record. So we got to probably try to keep true to what we think here. That's all.
Others?
We don't disagree with AKRF's analysis under that point, so we'll work with it.
Other board members?
Just that you'd have the same question could be raised of E. Proposed action may cause a change in density not supported by existing infrastructure or is distant from existing infrastructure. It's the same, essentially the same point.
Okay, well, maybe we'll let AKRF explain their point here, Chris or Aaron.
I think you've all kind of summed it up. We recommended having yes for the first question, just because of you're changing zoning, you're changing what's uses, and in this case, you can make an argument the adopted land use plan is the PDD, and you're changing it. So that was the point. That was really our thinking when we looked at that. I think you've all made great points.
The fact that we agreed with you is probably why it's so great, but that's all right, good. All right, so we're gonna make that a yes and for 17, unless Laura or Kim feel violently opposed. Well, you can be opposed, doesn't be violent. Okay, any other comments on 17? Okay, leaving the penultimate one, we'll go to the ultimate one, number 18. Consistency with community character. Dennis, comments?
I had some question marks, my review of it regarding E and F being inconsistent with predominant architectural scale and inconsistent with the character. I could be persuaded either way, but I'm wondering if that really should be an a yes, and at least those two items put as a small impact.
Yeah, I think AKR clearly believes the same from its memo. Anyone else want to go? Other comments? Thank you, Dennis. Others? Heidi, you're nodding your head. You want to say something?
I just agree with Dennis. I'm just agreeing.
Oh, you're.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything to add, but it sounds right to me.
Yeah. Others? Thank you, Heidi. Others? Okay, no, anyone else? No one? Laura, Kim, Peter? No. So I'll just add. I agree. It should be yes. I was focusing on B. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services, not schools, because we've had that long discussion, but police and fire. Definitely police, because we're going to have someone out there on the nights of the big events. I don't know if that to be exactly the case, and Kim is looking at me quizzically.
I don't, you have to remember that this has been at Boscobel for a long time. I don't know that I've ever seen police at Boscobel.
Well,
I mean,
I think
I just, it's, that seems a little.
There will be nights, remember, we have a lot more uses here than we have at Boscobel. And by the way, you're right, point well taken about me asserting what the police will or will not do. So that's a fair point, But my view is that there will be a need potentially for this. We are adding 21 buildings and several hundred people, and things will happen that do not happen right now at this facility. Whether that's a significant increased demand or a minor one, it will be an increase in demand. That's my view. Aaron or Chris, you want to do the AKRF piece?
Yeah, so we just checking yes is appropriate here, just because they're already studying it. They've shown us a pretty detailed scope in part 3. So we're inclined to just have that be yes. They are going to reach out to the community and emergency service providers as part of that scope too, which could be warranted, especially when you have extra uses than what's happening at Boscobel, right? You're going to have lodging, The fire department's going to want to make sure they can get in there with a truck, and they're going to want to look at the site plan. The police are going to want to look at it. I think that's a good idea, and they're planning to do that. So. Chris, anything else that I missed?
No, I covered it all, definitely.
Any other board members' final comments on 18? Okay, who took notes?
Who took notes?
I was just kidding. I was just joking. I mean, I hope.
We have a video record.
Well, hopefully, yeah, but we have to actually edit now the document, so someone hopefully has the power of the pen. I don't know, if, Jan, are you the scribe, or is that
I've been taking
Cheryl?
pretty good notes, but I'll defer.
Well, Cheryl, have you been taking notes? I've definitely been taking notes, but someone's got to go back and edit the EAF part 2 based upon what we've generally agreed to.
I have not, just because I do the video after.
Jan, you've got your notes. I've got mine. I'll ask you to make a revision to the EF part 2 and circulate it back with the board for our next conversation on this. If that's acceptable.
And Neil, this is Allie Patron. I'm the project manager for the project. I've been taking very rigorous notes, so we're covered on our end.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So it's 9:25. We've been at this for 2.5 hours. I'm happy to do a flyby of the part 3 scope outline. I'm not sure we have to have it read to us, and I'm not sure that's actually a productive use of time unless Jan and Aaron and Chris feel it's necessary. Because I think at this point there's a lot of good conversation we've had. We actually went much further than I expected, and I appreciate everyone's preparations of this board. Obviously, everyone on this board read all the materials, and thank you to the applicant for putting it together. And Aaron and Chris was very helpful supporting work you did in a very short amount of time. So thank you for that. But with your permission, I guess I'll ask Dan, but Dan representing everyone else, that do we actually feel like we need to go through the scoping tonight? If you'd like to, we can. You give us a tour of it. Otherwise, I'd call it an evening for a next conversation to review the revised EF part 2.
Well, I think that the revisions will be made by Allie, who is very rigorous in her note-taking, and Jan, and we'll get those to you, and they can be analyzed when we come before you next. But I think to get started on part 3, if everybody has the energy, it'd be a good idea. And also to have AKRF and yourself, Mr. Chairman, give us an idea of where the process would be and what you would like us to submit for the June meeting. Although, let me rephrase that. Hopefully, if we don't, obviously, we won't get through part 3 tonight. Would you want us on the agenda a week from tonight as well to go through?
No, you're not on the agenda a week from tonight. That's why we've spent 2.5 hours tonight. We're not going to do another 2.5 hours on.
Oh, no, I wasn't expecting 2.5 hours.
You're not on, the agenda's been released. You're not on the agenda for next week.
Okay.
This board needs a breather every so often.
I appreciate
so
that.
you're not on the agenda next week. As far as the June meeting, I think it seems appropriate. I'm open to a discussion among the board and our advisors from Steve and Ron. My sense is in the next meeting, we should look at a revised EEF part 2 tied to what we said tonight, so we can itemize and agree to it, since it's our part 2 that you're obviously helping us keep track of. And then from there, we can discuss the various pieces that you're working on. But I think it'd be useful to really get a revised EF part 2 after the changes we've made tonight. That feels like the right next step. Steve and Ron.
Oh, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, Neil. That's exactly what should happen next. I don't know how far you're going to be able to go with the EAF part 3 tonight. Maybe just a brief discussion of what the EAF part 3 is and the highlights of what it is the board can expect submitted with it. But to actually try to delve into any further than that,
which is my point, which is I just don't think having you read to us pages 1 through 6 of the section 3 of the binder is, I think we can all read it. I just don't, I don't know what we're going to do besides having you tell us what it already says, which I'm fine to have this if my colleagues would like to hear. but I think we can read. I can't, Jaume, would you like to say something?
Yes, one item that would be important is if we could talk about the acoustic survey, because that's something that we would like to start. And we provided a memo in part 3 of locations where we want to measure and what we are planning to measure, and it will be helpful to get confirmation if you agree with those so we can start the survey.
We can certainly dive into that piece if you want. I mean, but let's just take it up. Let's go. Let's still stay at the one level above. I just want to check with my fellow board members. Would you like to have a tour through the part 3 item, or have you considered it submitted and you can read on your own?
I can read on my own.
Me too.
Me too. I'd rather digest it and then come back with questions.
My
agree.
question,
Go ahead, Dan.
my question for the June meeting then would be, what, if any, further reports would you like us to provide on the theory that we will get through successfully and efficiently the part 2 finalization and move into the part 3? Is there anything that might help so that in going through the part 3 outline and scope that you would say, okay, they provided us with a little
I
bit
think
more.
Dan, I think there were a couple of points where we certainly said, whether it was Neil Toman's, I wish they'd add a column for TBD, or Laura's point, like, I can't answer this about light unless I see a light study. If Ally is is as good of a note taker as you say, we absolutely have the list of those areas that were these I can't answer unless I know circular reference. So those, I think there were at least 3 of those spots we talked about. The health being another one, but I don't think I don't know how long it takes to do a soil sample. And again, it would be helpful to us because as we said, and Steve alluded to, it's hard for us to sign off on the part 2 entirely until there are a couple items we have some data on, which makes this process oddly iterative. So that would be my answer to you. But so the completed part 2, excuse me, based upon what we agreed to move over from no to yes, or etc.
Okay.
And then those couple of places we mentioned, I think light was one, health was another. I think I brought up the point about the fauna that I think is an outstanding topic. It makes that one hard. Those are the 3 areas I think we said we needed more information.
Right, and then you can bank on her notes being letter perfect, and we'll govern ourselves accordingly. And
well, as Cheryl said, we've got it on video too. So,
Yep, I've got them.
So is that Steve? Any parting comments then about our process and where we are?
Well, you're going to want the revised EAF submitted reasonably well in advance of the June meeting, so the board can go over it and hopefully be in a position to, I think, adopt it at the June meeting, assuming that you have the information you need. I'm not trying to jump the gun here. And then once that's done, maybe if you can't quite do that yet, at least in tandem with it, start diving into the part 3, which is going to consist of, not only telling them what studies they need, but reviewing and listening to AKRF and Ron's review of the studies that they have. I think that's where you are right now.
If I can also speak to that. We're talking about the applicant resubmitting a revised part 2 based on tonight's comments. I also think it'd be worthwhile as part of that for them to revise the part 3 outline in accordance with the joint memo that AKRF and I put together. Because we had a variety of issues that we had identified that warrant further review in part 3. And so that part 3 outline, I think likewise could be amended to address those concerns as well.
Dan's in helpful guidance.
Jan, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. If the board had any more stamina tonight, we would just ask that, there's a couple of reports that we know that we have to complete that we're trying to get some direction on the scope of before we hit the ground running with them. And that's one Jaime just mentioned is the noise, and the other is probably the visual, just because we want to nail down the receptor points so that we could win those stuff.
So I'm happy for us to talk about the acoustic one I don't believe maybe Laura or Neil are professionally acoustic, have expertise in this topic. So do any board members, if you turn to Appendix C, have any comments on what they want to cover? And then I'll turn to Ron or AKR to give any more guidance to Jan about because I can't comment on your methodology. I don't even know what an LEQ is.
Right. But if there, say there was a location that you were really concerned about, like we've identified, we have a map that we're going to conduct ambient noise evaluations, right? Studies. If there was you thought that we didn't hit all the good receptor points and you wanted one added, now would be a great time for us to know that, so we can begin that evaluation and make sure we're hitting all the spots that you want us to evaluate, similar with the view shed. So if there was a specific view that you're concerned with, that you feel that we haven't included as a location where we're going to analyze, then we'd like to know that so we could begin those.
Let's start with the acoustic. Thank you, Jan, for asking. So board members turn to page 2, I guess, of Appendix C, which is this vantage point. Anyone have any comments to Jan's question? Laura, go ahead, please.
Okay, so my question is, so I get what you're asking, but I guess what I'm questioning is your ambient noise levels at what you're taking at these locations is going to be your baseline? Because ambient noise at like today and right now is going to be very different at the level of when they're in performance. And also we all know that noise, reverberates depending on cloud cover, density of humidity, and all of that. So I guess what I'm asking, and I don't understand like what the study is measuring, is are you going to get a baseline level at these 5 points? And then you're asking, are these the 5 locations where we need that baseline in order for then you to compare? Like,
yes.
what noise is going to be at performance level?
Yes, exactly. So we need to know the baseline. So when we model how much noise is coming from the 10, we'll be able to tell, okay, we are below the ambient or we are above the ambient.
Got it. Okay. And then are you going to take ambient at different, I guess, different temperatures and different weather pattern? Because it's different.
What I would like to identify is the lowest ambient. That would be the worst case scenario. And what I'm suggesting to do, traffic is going to be really an important noise source for the ambient noise, right? So I'm suggesting to do measurements on a Sunday between, I believe it was between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. So we have performances that will last until 10 p.m. So around that time is when we will see the lowest ambient noise levels. And that's what I want to capture. I'm really not interested in the ambient noise levels at 5 p.m. because this will be significantly higher. I really want to identify the lowest levels.
Okay, thank you.
That,
I have a question.
Oh,
sorry. I was just going to say that kind of answers our comment 25 from further down our memo in part 3.
So my question is actually for Steve. When we in the past have talked about the town ordinance related to sound, is it at the edge of the property? Is it, is there like a distance that it extends that we typically require?
My recollection, and I haven't looked at the noise ordinance in a long time, is that it's measured at the boundary of the property.
That's what I thought.
It is at the property line.
Yeah, okay. So that was just my question, because obviously if that's the rule we follow. And these are these all on the property line? It looks like it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Aren't there, excuse me for interrupting, aren't there houses to the northwest of 5 and also to the northeast, or are they outside the ambient noise consideration zone?
There are houses to the north and also to the northeast. The critical locations acoustically, I already did some modeling of noise coming from the tent into the areas around the site. And the critical areas are mainly the ones located to the southwest, because those will be the quietest areas. I mean, the ones that are close to Route 9, they'll have a lot of ambient noise. But the ones that are located to the southwest are the ones that are the most critical. So I would say 2, 3, 4. And then beyond 5, they are really far away.
Yeah, I thought they seemed to get pretty distant at that point. So thank you.
Other comments on the audio map?
I don't know that they're that far away behind 5. I think if you moved your position 5 west a little bit, there's a lot of houses along Lovell Lane. Several of them showed up at the site walk, so I think they're very concerned about and they're not that far away. I'd move it over. I've moved number 5 west a little bit. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Other board comments? So I'd add a 6th at the northeast corner. I know there are a bunch of houses that are not that far from what your proposal are for the houses on the northeast corner. I hear your point. Sir, one more time, your name is pronounced how?
Jaume.
Jaume.
Jaume, James in Catalan. So
what was the last? Sorry?
It's James in Catalan, so it's pronounced Jaume.
Oh, got it. Jaume. Got it. I was getting, got it. Jaume. There are houses that are definitely noisier over there. So I get your point about it doesn't really matter as much because there's a higher ambient noise level. But there are homes that are on your northeast corner. As you can see, you'll see a grain silo of one of the houses that's over there. That's not that far. So I think for purposes of completeness, I think that wouldn't hurt if you wanted to add a spot to your northeast corner.
Are we talking about the property line of our site or beyond?
No, I think it's your property line. I think
Okay.
that is what matters. I think. I mean, although we just saw someone, I guess someone added in the chat. I mean, and Laura said it. You know, sound travels. I mean, those who live here hear the wailing sound of the train on the western side of the tracks, the western side of the Hudson, for miles and miles. So it's not like sound doesn't travel. So, all right. Any other comments you need on your? Yes, Heidi, please.
Well, I was wondering with respect to the wildlife impacts, like where are the bats on this map? Where are the bats that might be impacted or any other communities of wildlife? I guess that's yet another thing that hasn't been entirely measured yet, but in terms of the bats, the closest community of bats.
Are you asking from a sound perspective, or are you back on the flora and fauna topic?
No, I'm asking from a sound perspective because I would guess that bats don't love to have loud noises. I mean, and I can think the whole idea is they have nowhere else to go. They have to live in this area, or they'll be wiped out.
Heidi, I'm not a wildlife expert by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding is there are certain caves that the bats overwinter in. They are not on this property.
I know, but they're 5 miles away.
The bats, when they do come to this property, other than using it maybe just as a transitory hunting ground, would be roosting in trees. They like shaggy bark trees. They like to crawl under the shaggy bark and roost for the night. But I don't think
you sound like an expert to me, Steve.
I know a little bit. But I don't know that they're going to be able to say, well, it's this coppice of trees that they're in, or it's this area here in the northwest of the property that they're in. The bats are going to go where the bats want to go. I mean,
well, but bats fly by sound. I mean, they're very sound sensitive. That's why I asked. I mean, I named bats in particular because that's a type of wildlife that is they travel by sonar or something like. I mean, they travel. They use sound to for their very existence somehow.
Well, if you want to measure the ambient sound and the increase in sound when the property is being used, that's fine as far as that goes. But as I understood your question, you were asking where on the property are the bats?
What's closest on the property to where the closest population of bats is? That's my question.
We don't know that, and we don't know that the bats are on the property. The DEC has identified that they're in proximity. I have to look back on the paperwork to see if they give us a certain distance or not, but they haven't told us that the bats use the property at all. It's just they're in the area. So it's something that we have to look further into.
Well, Jan, yeah, I know you said that the bats aren't on the property, but my question is, do you have a noise receptor at the closest part of the property to the bats? If they're, a few miles away, which of these receptors is the closest to the community of bats that was identified?
I can't answer that right now.
Yeah, I think we're back to the same. I think this is still a fauna problem we've got, which is we just don't, not problem, but we just don't know enough to have the view of that. Okay, you want some input on another study? I'm just, you want
Yes, on
input?
the view shed points, Mr. Chairman.
So do people have, I mean, which document? I mean, I know we have a lot of documentation. Not a lot. You gave us some documentation on view sheds from both this side of the Hudson and across the river. And your question is what in particular?
Whether any others are recommended or suggested by the board or AKRF.
I don't know if board members any points, because what I don't want to do is put us in a position where the board is, we've been at for 2 hours and 45 minutes. People are getting a little tired, and I don't want to say, if you don't have an answer now, you're done. I do want people to think about it. So I'm happy to have us give a view now, but I think we should reserve the right to further comment. We just, again, people are getting tired. I'm certainly getting tired. So do people have any viewpoints at this point? No pun intended. About view shed. Oh, Chris, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Chairman, I was stretching my arm.
Oh,
I
guess he's tired too. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
My fatigue made me want to ask if we get a cicada credit on the noise study.
Well, that's really a bad joke. All right.
Sorry.
That's all right. All right. Any board members have any points on view sheds or additional views?
The one document really to focus on here, Mr. Chairman, is in Appendix A, the figure that's called Proposed View Shed Analysis Location. Yep. And then we give an example of what we would tend to do at those locations.
But your locations to Kim's earlier point are all west of Hudson back to here. Is that correct?
No, they're on Route 9.
Oh, okay. So is the pictures, what I was talking about was the pictures you gave us that showed the view from, say, Storm King, et cetera. So typically what we talk about when we talk about the view shed is the Appalachian, from what you can see from points that are publicly accessible, like the Appalachian Trail or Bull Hill or, things like that. So I think what we want is to know what the view shed is from those publicly accessible places. Not just 3 spots on Route 9.
And that kind of echoes what our comment is too as well. I mean, we noted that you've got 3 on Route 9, you've got a few on the other side of the river. What about in between? Any particular spots other than Route 9 near the site that should be considered? For example, anything in the park, Hudson Highlands or Bonstock, anywhere that might look into this? That was the essence of that comment, and Kim's pretty much echoing it.
Right. So I don't know what you can, I have tried to see the Garrison from Route 9D, for example, can't see anything. I haven't been on the Appalachian Trail. I haven't been up on Bull Hill. So I don't know what you can see, but if there are any of those places where it is possible to see it, we'd just like to know that.
We'll take
Similarly, all roads that the project fronts on are within the scenic protection zone. So if there's any areas on Snake Hill that have any views of the proposed development, and probably predominantly the tent, it may warrant some view sheds from that location as well.
Yeah, I don't even know if you can see anything from Snake Hill.
That's what I
Maybe
wonder.
through
That's
the
what I
new
wonder.
buildings, yeah.
Yeah.
but It's difficult at ground level almost anywhere. It's only when you're up on the hills really that you can see stuff. And this is a particularly kind of hidden
Okay.
view shed, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, you can't really see it until you're on the far kind of eastern end of Snake Hill. And you can't see it from, like you say, Route 90 or any of the lower elevations to the west.
Okay, well, I'd like to keep that question open. You take that input. Obviously Glenn Watson has done this for this board many, many times for all kinds of view sheds. So I'm sure Glenn has some thoughts about other vantage points that would be of use. But I personally, from personal experience, I agree with Kim's and Peter's observations that it's relatively hidden property already, which is a good thing for this purpose.
Kim, we're happy to look at the points you mentioned just to see if there's anything we can find offhand that we can address, either with a photo showing it doesn't have a view, just to confirm. But I think one of the things and maybe to clarify one of your comments from earlier, is there are two ways we're looking at the site, one through a section and one through a perspective, because we felt there were different ways to look at it. So you're right that when you view these, there are some, just from across the river, a section doesn't do us a lot of good. So we thought that was a more compelling way to talk about it, if that makes sense to you. So I think we're also looking for confirmation that these are readable, that you understand what we're communicating through the particular documentation that we're addressing, or we're suggesting we would provide.
Okay, any other comments from any of the board members? Any other comments?
I will just say this. I really appreciate, I know Neil said this at the beginning of the meeting, but in looking at the new drawings of what the site's going to look like, I really appreciate that you actually listened to the comments that we had and adjusted things like the housing and you know, the Snake Hill Road entrance and things like that. I just, you know, it's not so common that an applicant actually listens. So we appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate the comments. So thank you.
And Mr. Davis came late to the party tonight, but it wouldn't have been possible without his additional generosity. And I think I'd like to just mention that in closing.
Oh, I just think we listen to the comments because we're neighbors, and you know, I know many of you in the community and as friends, and you know, we don't want to embarrass you, and we want to do something that we're all proud of and look back on. And so the comments have been very helpful.
Any other comments from our advisors, Steve or Ron, AKR, if anything? No.
Just on the visual while we're on it, I wasn't sure if they could address my question about number 3 from 9W. Is that showing that you can actually see the property, or is it not visible? I wasn't sure from that exhibit that you provided.
Yes, sorry. Yes, you can see it. That's why we have both the summer and the winter.
Yeah, can you show an arrow pointing to the site on those?
Absolutely. We're going to show how the structures sit in the site, and then we will highlight with an arrow where it is. We want to make sure those views were, you know, usable.
That's page 47 of the PDF for the board, if you wanted to look at what I'm talking about. It's the figure that says proposed view shed from west side of Hudson River. It's number 3 on 9W.
Are we waiting on something? I'm sorry. I'm a little
Yeah, what page was that?
It's
Oh, I'm looking at a PDF file, so
Aaron, if you have additional, my opinion, if you have additional things that you think the applicant should work on, I think I'm sure you and the applicant are in conversation. So I'm happy to let the technical folks
yeah,
take
it's
it
in the
offline.
memo already. So
Okay.
I just wanted to figure they could answer it now. But
I get paid extra if I get us done by 10 o'clock. So that's why I'm trying to.
So we can talk for 7 more minutes.
Yeah. There you go. Well, that's someone who's that's an hourly paid employee, I can tell. All right. Okay, anything else? Anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you, Peter. Second. Neil. All right, thank you very much. We'll see you back all here next week for the rest of our agenda, not including Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival. Thank you, Cheryl, for hanging on. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Cecilia. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.